So I have a Kubota M5700, 2001 I believe it is, and I had an oil leak in the wheel seal on the left hand side, and decided to try and change it myself because mechanic's a long way away from where I live in Alaska. So bought the parts, and I'm not a videographer and I'm not a mechanic, but since I couldn't find anything on YouTube that really was for my tractor, for this model, I decided to go ahead and film what I could. I know I missed some spots looking back at some gaps, but it's more information than I could find otherwise, so hopefully it'll help anybody there. And if you have any negative comments for my videography or mechanical skills, yeah, tough. But anyway, hopefully it's of some value to you. Thanks. Bye. Okay, I have my M5700 Kubota that has an oil leak here in the wheel seal. So I'm not a mechanic, but I couldn't find anything on the internet, so I'm gonna make something and put it there for you if you need it. So this tie rod wouldn't come out. I pounded and pounded and pounded, and finally borrowed a friend's, he calls it a pickle fork, and that's what it finally took to remove that. There are two bolts here and here on the Zerk fitting that I'm assuming will come right off. I had to spend, just spent 60 bucks on a special pair of pliers to get the retaining clips out of here, and because my needle nose wouldn't do it. And I will update this as we go along here, but that's what it looks like inside. I pulled the cap out. That's the cap laying there. Just pulled the cap off with pried it off with a pair of pliers or a screwdriver, and we'll go. So the shaft did not fall out like I assumed it would once I got this clip and the shim out. So in looking at the manual, it says to disassemble, I have to take off. So I've taken off all of these screws, bolts, and there are actually a couple that the nuts come off backwards a little bit on the back. We'll see what happens on the inside of this. I'm about to pull this all off. Okay, I took those bolts out, and that's what it looks like on the inside. And there's the gear I need to try and tap out, it looks like, according to the service manual. So we'll try to tap it out. Okay, I pushed that gear, and spline was up in here, and I just gently tapped that down and it slipped out. And now I'll try to take off that whole housing. Hopefully I can reach in the snap ring inside. And that's what it looks like up on the inside. You can see there's another snap ring right there. Oops. Right there. We'll proceed to take that off. The bottom bearings got this out. They were up there, but now that next set of bearings there is on a lip, and I can't get this whole hub. The whole hub. Looks like I'm going to have to take these big bolts off, because I assumed it would all slide off at this point, but it's not sliding. I was really hoping that whole housing was going to slide off when I took off got that spindle out of there, but it's not going to. So it looks like I'm probably going to have to take off the big bolts in the back and remove that whole hub. Learning is just learning. Okay, so I ended up having to take this whole thing off, the hub here, and it was basically, there are two forward facing bolts here, and then three that face backwards the other way, and I just gently tapped it and forced a screwdriver in there. There isn't any kind of gasket, it doesn't look like, no O-ring. There, it looks like there's an O-ring there though. I'll probably have to call them and get that. And then these clips here, hopefully when I take that bearing out, I'll be able to access the internal and then take that all apart. Okay, I got that pulled off of there. I took the retaining pin off of that retaining clip. Am I going to need some kind of bearing puller or puller to get those out? I don't want to damage them. So this was sitting in here in that space, and there's some gaps here. There's some gaps right here, and I literally just took a couple of pieces of bent wire and went down underneath and lifted the bearing out with a wire on each side, lifted it straight up, and then down inside that piece is seated in that hole right there, and I pulled it out already and then thought to videotape it. So it's got to go back flush in that hole in there, tighter all the way flush down to the base, and we'll see if the guts come out now and I can change that O-ring. So once I took the bearings out of there, I just gently tapped. There was a little bit of a gap there, and I just tapped a screwdriver in there, the width of it, and gradually just wedged that out, and that's a real tight fit. I've seen in a few other videos where that's real dirty, and mine is real dirty, and the oil seal's right underneath that, and that all just comes out there, and there's the oil seal that I need to replace. Wish me luck. That bright sun is finally gone, so there's what it looks like. There's the oil seal that I have to pull out of there. That's the core that was in there. So I'll have to replace that O-ring and pull this oil seal out right here, and then reassemble it. Okay, so this is the new oil seal I already put in there in that hub. This is the old one that I had to chisel out and bend enough that it would come out. And so then I just took a 2x6 and tapped that level down into that space, put a little bit of oil around the outside edge to help it slip down there a little better. And now I'm going to reassemble this. And I think it turns out probably that I didn't need to take this part off, because this ended up just being a pressure fit in here that I ended up prying off anyway. So, but I didn't know that, and it didn't come off easily to begin with, so I took that off. And that's what I learned. Bye. Okay, if you remember, this shaft that I had was sitting down here. If you look back in the video, you'll see it. I had to put this housing back on, and took a piece of plywood here and a piece of OSB and pounded that up. And so until I got this to fit in here, so those bolts would go back in here. So I knew it was up high enough. And then I reached up under here in the middle and put that clip back on. Put that clip back on in there, retaining pin, C-clip, and then I just took that shaft and bearing, and I had to wiggle them a little bit to get them to mesh, and then I had to just pop them up with my hand to get them into position, and now they're friction fit enough. I think they're in place. I can put these clips back on, the shims and the clips, and then hopefully that thing will just go on the outside peachy, easy.